you don't want to plug it in first because you don't want to have something happen where it accidentally gets turned on and then it's up in the air and it starts flying, or your hand's in the way and it gets caught. On the other side over here is the speed lever. So I'm going to just turn it on to a low, what it says, mix or stir. It's a number 1. And I'm just going to mix this up until it starts to get creamy. Now, if you guys can see this, the shortening is stuck on the beater. So I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to unlock it. And I'm going to use a rubber scraper, not a rubber spatula. This is a rubber scraper. And I'm going to scrape off that shortening so that it's not all stuck in one place. And you can cut up your shortening so that it's not such a big chunk to try to get it to mix better. So I'm going to lock it again, turn it back on. Once I have it mixed a little bit, you can turn it on to maybe a 2, so that then it goes a little bit faster so that it mixes up better and begins to cream better. The recipe then states, after I've creamed the shortening and sugars, I'm going to add the egg. Now, again, I don't have a sink, so I don't want to touch the egg at all. So I'm going to put gloves back on again. Once again, you would just wash your hands so that you're not passing any bacteria from the egg onto any other food. So once this is creamed and all the shortening is mixed in there really good, I'm going to turn it off. Okay, if you look, it kind of clumps and it's nice and soft. Okay, that's creamed. So I'm going to take my egg and I'm going to pour it in there. Now you guys would immediately put this egg custard cup in the sink to be washed so that it does not get on anything else and there's no bacteria passed once again. So I would have washed my hands, and the recipe then says add vanilla and mix well. Now, the function of sugars is to make it sweet, so it's flavor. The function of shortening, it's a fat, so it tenderizes, is what makes it kind of chewy. The egg is a binding agent, so it's going to hold things together. Sometimes the egg will also add a little bit of steam, so it helps them rise a little bit, but typically we don't think of an egg as a leavening agent, which means to rise. We think of it more as a binding agent. So I'm going to put those back in there, lock it again, and I'm going to turn it on. Now, the recipe then says in a separate bowl, I'm going to mix the dry ingredients. So I'm going to mix the flour, the baking powder, baking soda, and salt mixture. And I'm going to stir it up. Now, the reason why the baking powder, baking soda, and flour gets mixed separately is that baking soda and baking powder are leavening agents. Baking powder is called a double-acting leavening agent, which means that when it hits the liquid, it's going to start creating carbon dioxide, and then it's going to have the rising process starting. Now, when you make quick breads, it's extremely important that you guys mix everything separately and that your oven is ready before you put your quick bread or any whatever you're making that's a quick bread into the pan or onto the skillet, so that it doesn't rise too soon and you lose all the leavening. Baking soda is a single acting leavening agent, which means it only creates carbon dioxide once, and it creates it when it touches the liquid. So it will start to work when it touches this mixture because this mixture is wet. So you want to mix it up really good because you don't want to have any salt or baking soda or baking powder to be in one spot. So I'm just going to add the flour. Now, if we were using a hand mixer, we would not add the flour in at this time. We would add it in and then we would mix it by hand, because a little hand mixer does not have enough strength to mix in with flour when you're doing it a lot. So in our kitchens, if we always mix it with flour in the bowl, because we use them so often, our mixers would burn out. So I'm going to put this back down, lock it back up. Very important that you start it slow. If you don't, that flour mixture is going to go everywhere, and you're going to end up having a snowstorm or a flour storm. So we're going to just mix it gently and let it mix in. As you use your ingredient containers, your custard cups, measuring utensils, that prep cook one should have already had the water started. As soon as they come back from getting the supplies, the water should be started so that they can start washing dishes right away. I just want to make sure everything is mixed up really well in there. So I turned it on a little bit higher. And then I'm just going to unlock it, and I'm going to unplug it because I'm going to take this beater off. And I don't want it to accidentally turn on with my hand in there. So then I just lift it up. I push up this time on the beater again, turn it to the left, and it will unlock and come off. Now, we do not use our hands to clean these off. You always use a rubber scraper or a spoon. Remember, you are in what would be considered a public setting, where if you were in a restaurant, you'd be feeding people other than yourself, as you do in here. So we do this all according to a restaurant standard. So there is never any fingers on the beaters or any other food product that you're touching or that you're measuring. So you get it cleaned off as good as you can, so that you have all the possible dough. And now remember, we don't lick this. We don't lick our rubber scraper. We don't lick the bowl. We don't eat the dough. It's got raw egg in it. And if you would eat this, you could get sick. I don't know if I told you guys the story about my lovely students that were in 7th and 8th grade many years ago, and we made sugar cookies, and they snuck the dough out of here, and they put it in their lockers, and they had morning class. All day long, they snacked on their cookie dough. Needless to say, they spent the next 3 days in their bathroom, laying next to the toilet so that they could be in there because they were very sick, and they missed 3 days of school. Not a fun way to miss school, okay? When you're done, just put this down, lock it back up, and then you guys will wipe it down with a washcloth, and then wrap the cord around it so that it's unplugged. You know it's unplugged, and then you guys would put it off to the side on your counter. Now, in the bowl, you're going to now add the oatmeal, the coconut, and the chocolate chips. You do not ever add the chocolate chips in when you're mixing it in a mixer, because it'll bust up the chocolate chips and you'll have these little tiny pieces instead of having nice sized chocolate chips. You're going to mix this up so it's all mixed together. You guys aren't actually doing this lab. I should have told you that. This is just for demonstration purposes, for measuring. So I'm just wanting to, this is what I use to show you all the different measurements. So don't get too excited that you're going to make these cookies. But you will get to try them as long as they don't burn. Alright, then what you're going to do is you're going to take your cookie sheet, and this is parchment paper. Parchment paper is used so that it does not, they do not stick to the pan and start to burn on the pan. So you just take and we will cut it in half, and you would use 1/2 on each pan for whatever you're making. It's also that you don't have to grease a pan. So if a pan calls for to be greased, you can simply put parchment paper on there, and then it saves you from having to grease the pan. Alright, I'm going to use 2 spoons because I don't want to touch the dough, and I'm going to grab a little bit of dough, and I'm just going to place it on the pan and kind of shape it with my spoons. When I do this, I'm trying to get an equal amount for each cookie so that they're even in size. Now, if it would call for you to roll them, like if you were making sugar cookies, put on gloves so that you're not touching the dough with your hands. You will notice I'm putting 3 across, and they have a good amount of spacing to them so that when they spread, they don't spread into each other and make one big huge cookie, because that would take probably 3 times as long to bake, and that's just a monstrous cookie, not individual ones. So you put 3 across and you put 4 down whenever you're doing cookies on your cookie sheet. Oops. The parchment paper also helps because the chocolate chips will melt, and as you can see, they're kind of on the top, on the sides. Some of them are falling out, so that way they don't burn on the pan as well, so you don't have such a big mess to clean up at the end of the hour when your cookies are done baking. This one has a lot of chocolate chips and doesn't want to stay in the shape of a cookie. There we go. Alright, so that's how you do it. 3 across, 4 down, and then you would take another pan and fill the next pan. You never want to put cookies on a hot cookie sheet because it will start to melt them, and then they will end up being thinner than you want them to be. So that's how you do the measurements, and so hopefully that will help you guys when you have your labs that you are measuring properly, because one of the grades that you get is for measurements, and if you don't measure properly, you will end up losing points. The biggest problem we typically have is the flour. People want to scoop it instead of spoon it, and then that causes your recipe to be too heavy or to be too dry. We did not talk about measuring liquids, so I'm going to put this off to the side, and I'm going to just measure a liquid for you. These are liquid measuring cups. They are your glass cups. They have measurements on the side. So there's a 1/4 cup, a 1/2 cup, 3/4, 1 cup, and then the 1/3 are on the other side. So when I'm going to measure, it's like a graduated cylinder or cup in science class. You always put it on a flat surface. You then bend down so that you're even with the cup, and then you measure to the amount that you want. So if I want a 1/2 cup of water, I measure until that meniscus is right at 1/2 cup. Okay, so I'm not holding it up. I'm not pouring from above. I want to be level to it so that I have the right amount. So that would go for any of your liquid measures. All right, hope you have a good day, and make sure you guys are behaving. I'll see you soon, hopefully.